Welcome back to Pokemon episode summaries. Today, I'll be doing episode 68, the evolution solution. The episode begins with Ash still in Pallet Town when he sees a whole bunch of people getting ready to go on a trip, in a massive line. Ash's mother was one of these people, who comes up to Ash as she's preparing to enter the line, informing him that they were going to the Seafoam Islands for a beach trip. Ash then further examines the line and sees Misty and Brock in there as well, who reveal that they were invited for some reason. I don't know why they were, but fucking Ash wasn't. Well, apparently Ash was, but Ash's mom decided not to tell him, as she knew that he should be training for the Pokemon League instead, despite it being 2 months away. Ash eagerly decides to join the line with his friends, but he's immediately pulled back by his mother for this reason, demanding that he train. Ash reluctantly obliges, as his mother, Brock, Misty, and all the Pallet Town locals take off for Seafoam Islands, while he's stuck alone with Mr. Mime. Not wanting to be alone with Mr. Mime, obviously, Ash decides to go to the Pokemon lab and see what Professor Oak was up to. He was probably doing something interesting. Well, when he finds him almost having a mental breakdown, fucking scratching his head relentlessly. Ash asks him what's wrong, with Oak responding that he was trying to figure out how Slowpoke evolved into Slowbro, but couldn't figure out how, and noted how even the Pokedex couldn't explain it when Ash suggested that he just use the Pokedex. All they knew was that a Shelder was involved somehow, but they didn't understand how it worked. Ash mentioning the Pokedex, however, makes Oak come up with an idea to find the inventor of the Pokedex, Professor Westwood, and ask him about it, as if there's anyone who would know about the evolution into Slowbro, it would be the fucking inventor of the Pokedex, the thing that knew almost everything about Pokemon. Oak requests that Ash go and find Professor Westwood for him, stating that he lived on Seafoam Island. This excites Ash and Pikachu, as it meant that they would get to go to Seafoam Island after all, if they decided to help. Wanting that beach vacation, and not having to live on their own with Mr. Mime, they eagerly say goodbye to Mr. Mime and head off. As soon as Ash arrives on Seafoam Island, he sees Misty and Brock windsurfing, and immediately calls to them, which startles them as they did not expect to see his ass on the island, and Misty ends up falling off her board. Ash wastes no time in explaining why he was there, and Brock and Misty become interested, and decide to follow him. They find the lab after a bit of walking through some trees, and immediately encounter Dr. Westwood. He shows them around his lab, filled with numerous pages of books and dex entries, and explains that he was actually Westwood the Fifth, implying that there was 4 before him, as he showed them pictures of all of them. A lot of them were almost identical, with the exception of the oldest one, who looked a lot more handsome and had a rose in his mouth. He stated how being called specifically Westwood the Fifth was important to him, as he wanted to make sure that his past ancestors' legacy was still honored when people thought of him. While Ash and the gang look at the pictures of all the Westwoods on the wall, Westwood literally makes note of Misty's Togepi, absolutely amazed by it, just finding out that it existed, as it was only added in the newer model of the Pokedex, right? Westwood the Fifth invented the original Pokedex, meaning he's never even heard of Togepi before. Westwood then remarks how long it's been since he's written a Pokedex entry, and wonders if there was any other new Pokemon that have been discovered that he hasn't written anything on yet. This leads him to apologize to the pictures of the previous Westwoods on the wall, as he thinks that he's dishonoring their legacy by not having the information on every Pokemon, and admits that he should have kept looking for more Pokemon instead of changing his priorities to writing little fictional stories about Pokemon, which he admits he was now doing in his free time. He then comforts himself a bit, though, by at least stating that he didn't have a whole bunch of free time, so he wasn't wasting that much time on writing fictional shit. This leads Ash and the gang to wonder what Dr. Westwood was doing that was so important that he didn't consider it free time, assuming that he was entirely retired at this point. But Dr. Westwood reveals that he was in fact trying to figure out the mystery of how Slowpoke and Shelder interact and evolve together, adding that he needed to, because he was assigned by a group of Pokeologists called the Symposium to come up with a theory. Essentially, Pokeologists were just people that collected data on Pokemon and shit. So I guess you could consider, like they're just professors. I guess you could even consider Professor Oak a Pokeologist, just not on the same level as someone like Dr. Westwood. And the Symposium was the world's leading group of Pokeologists, so they were really smart and influential. After listening to Westwood's long speech, all Ash really cared about from it was the fact that Westwood was in fact researching the Shelder and Slowpoke evolution, noting how that's what Professor Oak had sent him to the island in order to figure out. Westwood then looks out of the lab window and spots the Slowpoke that he had been watching for a while, as it walks on some rocks. Dr. Westwood stated that the reason why he was doing this was because in order to understand the evolution between Slowpoke and Shelder, he needed to understand Slowpoke first. He clarified that he didn't just watch out of a window to do his research, no. He got out in the field, and in this case, he then went outside by the Slowpoke and proceeded to start fishing. Doing so since Slowpoke was one of the few Pokemon that fished, utilizing its tail. Since Slowpoke's tail changed when it evolved into Slowbro, Dr. Westwood hoped to understand the mechanics of its tail more by fishing, since that was Slowpoke's tail's primary use. Westwood then tells Ash and the gang to use Ash's Pokedex to learn more about the Slowpoke so that they can get caught up to speed on what he knows, as anything the Pokedex knows, Westwood obviously knows, and the Pokedex refers to Slowpoke as the dopey Pokemon, as it was known for being super lazy and slow, both physically and mentally. After hearing this rude Pokedex entry, Ash and the gang get mad at Dr. Westwood, stating that he should be kinder to the Slowpoke than calling it fucking dopey in a professional Pokedex. Dr. Westwood admits that while calling it dopey was rude, he had to do so, as the entire point of the Pokedex was to be an accurate encyclopedia, so he couldn't just embellish it and say, oh yeah, Slowpoke is very, very smart, when it obviously wasn't. He had to tell the truth. Despite Westwood's reasoning, Misty still feels bad for the Slowpoke, likely partially due to it being a water type, and instructs the Slowpoke to defend itself, stating that it shouldn't let itself be called dopey like that. Come on, man. The Slowpoke doesn't seem to care about being insulted, though, as it simply continues fishing with no reaction, or it really just was too stupid to even know what was going on. This ignorance that the Slowpoke had, and the ignorant look on its face, caused Misty to be reminded of something, but she couldn't quite place her finger on what it was. As if on cue, though, her Psyduck then forcefully pops out of its Pokeball as she realizes what she was thinking of. Slowpoke and Psyduck were very similar. They were both treated as stupid, and were stupid. It's then revealed that the Psyduck wanted to come out of its Pokeball because it wanted to talk to Slowpoke. They probably knew that they would get along, due to both being utter dumbasses, and also both of them being hated as well. Ash and the gang obviously have no fucking clue what Psyduck and the Slowpoke are talking about, not just because they were Pokemon, but because they were talking very slow as well. Slowpoke and Psyduck's conversation is then interrupted by a Krabby who comes out of the water and tries its best to pinch Slowpoke's tail. It does this, but Slowpoke has no reaction whatsoever, likely due to being fucking too stupid to feel the pain. Or maybe it meant that its body was used to things biting on its tail, and it meant that it didn't feel pain, because when the Krabby then bites on Psyduck's tail, Psyduck does eventually feel pain, although it takes it a while, but that was likely because Psyduck was too stupid to feel pain. It's likely that the Slowpoke genuinely didn't feel pain, because that was how they were born. I mean, I guess the Slowpoke couldn't really fish if it felt pain on its tail, right? And speaking of the Slowpoke fishing, it manages to catch a Magikarp, and it doesn't yelp out in pain at all, so yeah, I think that pain theory was true. Westwood then claims that Ash and the gang had done enough research for now, and invites them back to his laboratory for lunch so that they can take a break. I guess learning about the tail was enough for him for now. Meanwhile, Giovanni was also on the Seafoam Islands, and he was currently relaxing with his Persian, who he was feeding a whole bunch of milk. He had decided to go to the Seafoam Islands in his helicopter after all of the stress from having Team Rocket's HQ fucking explode and losing his powerful Pokemon. He needed some R&R. Unfortunately for Jesse and James, though, this meant that Giovanni had some chores that needed to be done while he rested, so Jesse and James were assigned these chores, unable to rest on the island, even though they were there. James complained about the shit that Giovanni was making them do, such as clean his yacht and dig for clams, and Meowth, on the other hand, was more upset at seeing the immensely good treatment that Giovanni's Persian was getting as usual, getting to drink milk as opposed to just boring old water. When James is reminded of the water, he becomes really envious of everyone having fun on the water on the beach while he was stuck digging for clams. So he actually, in turn, gets more motivated by this as he digs rapidly, hoping to speed up the process so he could go and have some fun. However, when he digs rapidly, he ends up hitting a shelter. It immediately jumps out from the sand and startles him, but then he gets the idea to capture it, hoping to deliver it to the boss. Likely hoping that as a reward for catching a Pokemon, Giovanni would excuse them from the rest of the chores. So he decides to send out Weezing to attack the Shelder, but before Weezing can do anything, Shelder uses an Ice Beam on it, just as James was preparing to use a tackle. But actually, the Ice Beam missed Weezing. Whoa, no way, Team Rocket actually had some luck, and due to the Ice Beam missing, Weezing is able to get off a Haze attack, which blinds the Shelder, putting Weezing at the advantage. With Shelder immobilized, James takes the opportunity to try and catch it, but before he can throw his Pokeball, Jesse throws one instead and catches the Shelder, much to James's annoyance. Just then, one of Giovanni's butlers comes up to Jesse and James and informs them that Giovanni would like to talk with them. So, they go up to Giovanni, and they immediately try and show him the Shelder that they caught, hoping that he would be impressed, but he states that he didn't want a fucking mere Shelder, as it was super weak. Giovanni's Persian then looks at Team Rocket in disappointment, as Giovanni states that the reason why he called them over was because he actually had an important job for them to do, as opposed to catching a Shelder, which was to break into Professor Westwood's lab that he had just heard about, and try and steal any valuable information or Pokemon from it. Team Rocket oblige. Meanwhile, back at the lab while Ash and the gang were having lunch, Misty questions Dr. Westwood on how exactly the Slowpoke's tail was related to the evolution in the first place, and what the actual mystery of the evolution was. Why was it so hard to figure out? What Westwood then decides to explain by showing Ash and the gang a video on a computer, and he essentially explains that the reason why Slowpoke's evolution was such a mystery was because before Shelder evolves, it has a shell with hinges on it, but when it clamps onto Slowpoke's tail, its shell becomes spiral when it evolves. That was the entire thing that he was trying to figure out. Why did the shell suddenly change? And it wasn't really because of the tail. He once again states his reasoning for wanting to figure this out, being that he wanted to become as famous a scientist as Westwood the First, and get recognized by the Pokeologists. He proceeds to rant about this for so long that Ash and the gang start to get annoyed, and look out to the awesome view at sea in boredom as they see a motorboat. But not only do they see a boat, they see a parasail attached to it, which Team Rocket was using to get into the lab. Unfortunately for Team Rocket, though, the boat was going too fast, and this causes the parasail to detach from the boat and send it crashing down onto Dr. Westwood's balcony. Hey, at least they technically made it to the lab. Team Rocket proceed to squirm under the parasail in pain, and this causes Dr. Westwood to wonder what the fuck was going on, why had a random-ass parasail just crash-landed here, and why were there people under it for some reason. only for Team Rocket to then break out and swiftly reveal themselves, doing their motto. Westwood obviously demands to know who the fuck they were, and in response, Team Rocket then hand him a paper which has 3 fake Pokedex entries for Jesse, James, and Meowth, and they all recite them, making up lies about themselves in the process, like how they were super rich and cool. Meowth then stated that, although they were here to steal Pokemon, they also thought that they would kill 2 birds with 1 stone, with Dr. Westwood being the Pokedex inventor, and propose him 3 Pokedex entries so that they could be in the next Pokedex, assuming that he was the one who was working on it. When Meowth reveals this, Dr. Westwood is so distracted by the mere fact that Meowth can talk that he starts writing notes about it, completely missing the other point that Meowth made, being that they were going to try and steal the Pokemon and try and make them new Dex entries, and he didn't want to do that as he was too busy with his Shellder and Slowpoke research, so this causes him to immediately run away, not wanting to essentially be enslaved by Team Rocket. Misty then proceeds to grab the paper with Team Rocket's Pokedex entries on it and crumple it up though, as she obviously didn't think that they deserved to have Pokedex entries, leading Team Rocket to obviously get pissed off, but also lead them to put their entire focus on their other goal, which was to capture the Pokemon in the lab, just as Giovanni had ordered them. Misty thought she was doing something by crumpling up that paper, but in turn, it had actually just made Team Rocket more mad in the long run, and more dedicated to their stealing Pokemon goal. So Team Rocket chase after Dr. Westwood and corner him in his lab, and demand that he give them his Pokemon. He states that the only Pokemon that he had was Slowpoke, and pleads them not to take it, as he needed it. And Team Rocket are actually about to oblige, as they're like, oh, Giovanni won't like Slowpoke anyway. If he doesn't like Shellder, he's not gonna like Slowpoke, because Slowpoke's so fucking lame. But when they mention the Shellder, this gives Meowth an idea, being reminded of Slowpoke's evolution into Slowbro, requiring a Shellder, and he suggests that since Team Rocket had a Shellder, they could use it to evolve the Slowpoke and turn it into a rare Slowbro, which Giovanni would appreciate. As if on cue, the Slowpoke then walks into the lab, leading Jesse and James to attempt to capture it, but Dr. Westwood tells it to defend itself and use an attack. However, the Slowpoke doesn't understand what Westwood's saying due to being so fucking dumb, and this leads Westwood to simply grab it instead and run out of the lab, attempting to escape Team Rocket. However, being a clumsy bitch, he trips, allowing Team Rocket to catch up to him and send out their Shellder. Right as Team Rocket do this though, Ash and the gang show up, having trailed Dr. Westwood when he ran to the lab, and are surprised to see the Slowpoke running away from the Shellder. They're surprised at this, because Slowpoke was known as the slow Pokemon, right? Its whole point was that it was slow, but it was seemingly able to go fast if it really tried. I guess since Westwood had never experienced what it was like for a Slowpoke to almost evolve and be bitten by a Shellder, he didn't know that Slowpoke was capable of running like this. Knowing how Team Rocket were trying to get the Shellder to clamp on to Slowpoke's tail so that they could evolve it and utilize it for their own benefit, Ash decides to jump in and send out some of his Pokemon to battle the Shellder, but Misty then jumps in, arguing that her Pokemon would be better suited due to being water types, and they're on a fucking beach. So Misty decides to send in her Staryu. But as usual, Psyduck comes out instead, coming out of its own volition, leading Ash and Misty to obviously be shocked. And the Psyduck then walks up to the Slowpoke and starts trying to talk to it like before. And this reveals that the reason why Psyduck wanted to come out this time was because it felt like Slowpoke was in danger, and it wanted to try and talk to its friend. With the Psyduck being distracted by talking to Slowpoke, Shellder takes the opportunity to attack it and bites on his tail. Psyduck appears to have no reaction, which causes Ash to celebrate, as he's like, whoa, maybe we have a way to defeat the Shellder then. But shortly after this, Psyduck then screams and runs around in pain after all, revealing that it only just had a delayed pain reaction because it was so dumb to recognize pain, just like before. However, this doesn't really matter, as in the chaos of Psyduck rapidly running around, Shellder flies off Psyduck's tail, rendering its attack useless. James realizes that the Shellder wasn't able to take out Psyduck, and proceeds to send out his Weezing in order to do so, but all Weezing ends up doing is bouncing on Psyduck's head. Very useful. Psyduck then counters the Weezing by jumping up and launching it further into the air when Weezing bounces on it, leading Jesse to try a plan B, which is to grab the Shellder and simply throw it at the Slowpoke in hopes that the Shellder could grab on. But the Slowpoke sees Shellder coming and ducks, leading the Shellder to land on Psyduck instead. This time, however, the Shellder had landed on Psyduck's head, which Misty points out was going to be a good thing, as this meant that Psyduck's head would experience pain, giving it a headache, which would in turn allow it to activate its psychic powers, which Brock realizes as well. Psyduck, in fact, does just this, as it screams in pain before unlocking the ability of its psychic attacks and starting with Disable to paralyze Team Rocket where they stood, so they couldn't move. He then follows it up with a confusion attack, sending Team Rocket flying, along with Shellder, into the air. Dr. Westwood is absolutely amazed at Psyduck's psychic abilities, and instantly starts writing down details in his notebook, not having seen anything like this before. But, unfortunately, Psyduck then stops using its confusion attack as it loses concentration, being as stupid as it fucking was, and this causes Team Rocket to fall back onto the ground before they were blasted off, with Shellder bouncing off Psyduck's head right next to it. Despite Psyduck's failure to blast Team Rocket off, Dr. Westwood is still immensely pleased with it for being able to save Slowpoke, and instructs the Slowpoke to thank Psyduck. Slowpoke obviously obliges, due to respecting Psyduck in general, and he would just fucking go up to him just to talk to him. But the Slowpoke is so excited to go up to Psyduck that it doesn't watch where it's going, and trips on the Shellder, who was right next to Psyduck, and the Shellder takes the opportunity of Slowpoke being down to clamp onto Slowpoke's tail and evolve it into Slowbro. Much to Ash and the gang's, Pikachu and Togepi's, Team Rocket's, and especially Dr. Westwood's amazement, as Dr. Westwood stated that he was the first researcher to see Slowpoke successfully evolve, and this was going to definitely make him famous. Team Rocket, ecstatic that Slowpoke had managed to evolve, attempt to steal it, wanting to bring it to Giovanni, and this leads Dr. Westwood to order the Slowbro to defend itself, explaining to Ash and the gang that he knew that Slowbro had a new attack when it evolved, being Mega Punch. However, the Slowbro refuses to listen to Dr. Westwood and instead uses a different attack, being Amnesia. This backfires on it, as the Amnesia causes it to forget all of its other moves, including Mega Punch. Ash and the gang are confused at why this is, with Dr. Westwood revealing what the Amnesia attack was capable of, which was essentially making the Pokemon a bit stronger, but in turn, it had to forget several things. Thankfully, though, since Westwood spent so much time explaining what Amnesia did, the amount of time that passed was enough for it to wear off, allowing the Slowbro to use Mega Punch, as he individually punches all three members, sending them blasting off into the sky. Dr. Westwood then furiously writes down all the information he had learned about Slowbro's evolution from both the evolution itself and the recent battle, and Misty then questions if he had enough information to make his theory yet. Dr. Westwood happily confirms, stating he now knew how Slowbro was able to evolve, along with why the Shelder was willing to bite Slowpoke's tail, and why Slowpoke wasn't opposed to it. He states that both of the Pokemon were willing to do these things and evolve because it was mutually beneficial to them. It was beneficial to the Slowpoke because having Shelder's extra weight added to its tail meant that it could balance out its body better and stand up on 2 legs instead of 4. And now that it could do this, it could more efficiently travel on land, which means that the Shelder could travel on land, being attached to the Slowpoke's tail. Essentially, Shelder and Slowpoke realized the benefits that they had towards each other, and it essentially created an evolution that could be possible if the two of them were to combine. With the evolution mystery resolved, Ash, Brock, and Misty say goodbye to Dr. Westwood and begin their walk back to the mainland. Misty reminds Ash that his mom had ordered him to stay behind and train, and states how she would be mad if she found out that Ash ditched. But Ash argues that this whole experience was training after all, and he was right, because this was a filler episode, and filler episodes are the best training. Just then, Misty realized that Psyduck had still not returned to its Pokeball, and was looking sad, so she questioned it on what was wrong, and he merely just stood there, not reacting. Ash thought he knew what was wrong though, stating that they never gave it the chance to say goodbye to Slowpoke. They simply just said goodbye to Dr. Westwood, and left. Ash and the gang all agree that Psyduck should be able to say goodbye to its best friend, so they return to right outside Dr. Westwood's lab, where the Slowbro was, but immediately regret this, as Psyduck and Slowbro start talking, but they talk very slow, just like their initial conversation, meaning that Ash and the gang have to stay there and listen to it all night long, as Pikachu drifts off to sleep.